ever joins us, we'll go ahead and recognize her when she comes aboard. All right, so we'll call the meeting to order. Thank you. And the agenda review, I just wanted to go through. We have only one action item, 2 items on consent, and 13 informational items. So we should be able to keep the schedule today. I'm going to go ahead and open up for public comment on items not listed on the agenda. Okay, then no comment. We're going to go ahead and proceed and jump right into our action items, John. I think we've got one, and that's our meeting.
Yeah, we just have a consent item and a quick approval of an RGS. Oh, we have, before we get to the consent, Keller, I'm sorry. We always have this as our first action item for authorization to conduct these JPA board meetings and the project steering committee, all of our public meetings under the government code section for the emergency meetings because of COVID. We have adjusted this action item slightly because Sacramento County has lifted its COVID restrictions for in-person meetings. So you'll notice that this action item is worded, the governor's state of emergency related COVID-19 remains in effect. The local county one does not remain in effect, but it does for the state. And the state of emergency continues to directly impact the ability of members to meet safely in person. So this is open for the board consideration to be able to do this for another month. And that next month, coming into the month of March, that we'd have all of our public meetings virtually as we do now. And next month we can revisit this. Just a reminder, the difference would be that we still have our facility in Rancho Cordova open to the public. We post the agenda, so there is a public location. But locally, as the board members tune into the meeting and participate in the meeting, if we are not doing it under the emergency orders, that you would have to do it from a location that's accessible to the public and the necessary posting requirements. So we can continue to operate as we are now for another month, given the state of emergency, if the board would like to, and then monitor this as we go forward and reconsider next month. So, Michael, this is open for board discussion or an action.
Okay, John. I think it's pertinent for us to see this through to March, and then we'll go ahead and reevaluate as we look forward towards April. I think things might be lightening up then. I also wanted to just clarify the difference if we were to make the adjustment April going forward, or whatever month we go ahead going forward. We'll still be presenting, we'll still be delivering it and offering it through this medium. Just board members will have to post at the local locations that they're participating from and that the public can access. So that would be the extent of the changes, so that it's not really going to be something that impacts anybody who's been attending the meeting so far using these meetings. Is that correct? Okay, great. Do we have any comments or questions from our board members or state partners on this item before we go ahead and call for a vote? Okay, any public comment on the item? Okay, then I'd like to make a motion to approve.
This is Dina, I'll second.
Great. Marla, do you approve?
Yes.
Very good. Rachel, do you approve?
Yes.
Great. Becky?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Deborah Martinez, have you joined us?
Yes. And yes, I approve.
Very good. Thank you. Gilbert?
Yes, I approve.
Very good. Melissa?
Yes.
Very good. Roxana?
Yes.
Thank you. Rogelio?
Yes.
Very good. That brings us, Michael, to our consent items. 2 items on the consent calendar. The first one is the minutes from our January 27th meeting. We do have a few action items, and action item 1 is going to be covered on the agenda. That's the fiscal update. Holly will be providing that. Action item 2 is a update on our DEI activities. That was a large update was provided during the January 27th meeting, so we'll do that again in the future. Item 3, provide information on the enhanced data reporting data and Cowling going forward. We're going to be covering that in agenda item 7. And if there's any questions after we go through agenda item 7, we'll make sure that we address that action item there. And then on imaging, we'll be discussing that on agenda item 10. And on on action item 5, work with the state to determine compensation for consumers on benefits Cal collaboration model. Gabby, are you on?
I'm
Rachel?
on.
Very good. Did you have any update on that?
The collaboration model is progressing forward. We're focused right now on recruiting efforts to fill the slots of those who would participate in the collaboration model. In parallel, we're beginning some initial planning around orientation, kickoff meetings, as well as the first quarterly strategic planning meeting. So more to come, and we're working actively first to identify the folks who are willing to participate, and appreciate everyone's help already.
Thanks for that, Gabby. I think one of the items that was specific on the action item was the compensation for consumers that participate on the collaboration model.
Sure, thank you, John. Yep, to that point, we have planned for and estimated a compensation in line with CDSS's policy for customer compensation based on time estimates and what we project to need for this effort. We've shared that with CDSS this week for review, and we're underburning on some customer compensation for UCD efforts, so we think it could be cost neutral. We'll await CDSS's confirmation of those estimates next week.
Thanks, Gabby. Appreciate that. And then action item 6 will be on the multi-factor authentication, will be covered during agenda item 9. The other item that's on the consent calendar is an approval, and we're seeking approval of the Regional Government Services RGS Amendment 35. These are just a few cleanup items for staffing. Our new benefits Cal manager position, that is Joel Acevedo, a longtime consortium employee who's been promoted into the position. And we're happy to have Joel occupy that position. This wasn't a position that was filled through RGS before. Prior to this, the position was filled by Anna Chia, an LA County employee. So as Anna Chia returned back to the county, and we did a recruitment, Joel accepted this position and it's through RGS, so we have to mend that into the contract. And then the other item was sort of a cleanup. We've been aligning our RGS compensation rates and minimum quals and those types of things with LA County position descriptions and standards. And there was just one position description for one of our section directors that we had to align rates and update some of those positions and numbers of positions. So it's a cleanup item that we track those items to. And all of the funding for that's covered through our approved project funding. So those are the 2 items, Michael, that's up in the consent calendar.
Thank you, John. Just a quick question on that position. So when we have an open position for the project, it's put out to the counties initially so that to see if there's interest as well.
Yeah, it's put out for the counties. We do a recruitment, and if somebody's selected from the counties and the director supports that, and the county will support that position, then we try to keep them in their county position and adjust the compensation and qualifications and everything with the county personnel department. If the county cannot support that position, we still do an offer to the individual through Regional Government Services, and then that person can make that selection on whether they would want to go forward with that.
Okay, good. Thank you for clarifying that. Any other questions, comments from our board members or our state partners on the consent items? Any public comment on the consent items? Okay, hearing none, do we have a motion to approve them?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Or-
I'll second.
I think that was Rachel and Becky.
Very
Yes.
good. Very good. You seen that look on my face, Michael?
Well, I was watching which ones flashed. I caught them in the corner of my eye.
Sorry, I'll say next time.
That's okay.
Very good.
We'll confirm with you.
Marla, do you approve?
Yes.
Thank you. And Becky at the second. Dina, do you approve?
Yes.
Thank you. Deborah Martinez?
Yes.
Thank you. Gilbert?
Yes.
You. Melissa?
Yes.
Thank you. Roxana?
Yes.
Great. Michael?
Yes.
All right. And Rogelio?
Yes.
Very good. That concludes the items, and now we're going to go into informational items. And let's go to the next slide. We, both Christiana and I, have gone through this at PSC and have exposed a number of the directors to this. We want to sort of get it into the record, make sure it's part of the JPA deck. So I'm going to go pretty quickly through this deck. Earlier this month, OSI arranged for a legislative staff briefing to bring the legislative staff up to date as they enter into this budget season on what our progress is on Kalsas, where we're at, what we have on our plate as they consider the budget and future legislation. So we wanted to ground people on what is Kalsas because there were some new members. And this slide did that. Let's go to the next slide. And the next slide. We talked about the former C4 counties cutting over on September 27th, resuming operations on September 27th. We talked about transaction volumes and performance, going to a pre-migration expectation. That didn't mean everything was perfect, but the system was operational and counties were conducting business. Go to the next slide. We talked about areas of focus, specifically imaging and some of the challenges that we had with imaging, and some additional items that we had when counties were not able to see documents, and we had to restore those documents on 2 occasions and working through that, as well as some training gaps and defects that we're still working through. We let the legislative staff know that that was the reason, and the instability in that launch to push out the LA go live date on imaging, which is also linked to Benefits Cal. We fielded a few questions on that and talked through that. And later on, you're going to hear from our imaging team, Arnold Malvik, and I think we do have representatives from Highland on board to give you an update on where we're at with imaging and taking care of some of the items that we discussed in our last meeting. And then we discussed a little bit of the enhanced support to normalize and optimize productivity in our former C4 counties, and some of the additional engagement to address ongoing correspondence questions, items, and some reporting questions that we have going forward. So we wanted to let them know that we continue, this is a continued work in progress, but the counties overall are doing well. Let's go to the next one. This was just showing the volume, the numbers, and those types of things, so they had an idea of the numbers of dollars and users on the system thus far. Let's go next. We talked a little bit about our breakdown of our state programs that are there. Of course, Medi-Cal being our largest program that's supported, with CalFresh and CalWorks there as well. We did not put in GAGR, but we could supplement that should folks want us to do that going forward. Next slide. And then we talked a little bit about what Benefits Cal is, what systems it's replacing from the 3 former SAWS portals, and a high-level definition so our ledge staff knew what the system is for, and that it supports both customers as well as CBOs. Next slide. We talked a little bit about some statistics, what the 39 counties are seeing, and doing a little year-over-year comparison from 18, 19, 20, and 21 across the programs and the total, with a little bit of analysis on why we may see fluctuations and variations really due a lot of that to the pandemic and how it was impacted programs. Next slide. This looked at an item, and the advocate partners were at this briefing that we've been asked a number of times is how many, when we look at just the CalFresh applications, how many are coming in directly from customers into Benefits Cal? How many are being submitted by CBOs? And how many are coming in through Get CalFresh? And this is the breakdown of that. And as you can see, a large percentage continue of the CalFresh only applications coming in through Get CalFresh. Go to the next slide. This is just that snapshot of Benefits Cal by the numbers, which I think the board has seen on a number of occasions. Next slide. This is a little bit of the learnings and successes that we've had. I think we've talked about our mobile first design, and it seems like over 70% are using a mobile device when going on to Benefits Cal. And then what we learned was it's easier to have new accounts created for the public instead of converting accounts and having them remember their log on. So we're working that with LA County and each one of the counties going forward, and that this increased awareness of Benefits Cal also creates some customer service volume for the counties as we get more information on that. And then we talked about upcoming releases, the things that the advocates been working for. And Lisa Salas and Karen Rapinati are going to give you some update on some of the items that our state partners, advocates, counties have wanted specific to release of information and some additional community-based organization dashboards and details as we roll forward. And those are things on the horizon. Next slide, and the next slide. We talked about LA County's journey, and that right now we're targeting the March-April timeframe. We sort of left it nebulous because it's all dependent upon our ability to test out, our ability to pass those tests and do that. So we've been working with LA County on the Benefits Cal and imaging. You'll hear later on in the agenda about that. Testing has begun on imaging, performance testing, training's begun, and same thing with Benefits Cal. We wanted to put that on our legislative staff's radar. Next slide and next slide. Then we gave a quick overview of the Cal win waves and how we do releases, when we do releases, how they are impacted by each waves, and then the migration activities that stack up for each one of those waves as we go forward. So we gave an overview of this chart. Let's go to the next slide. We wanted folks to be aware of the waves. When we talk about the waves, we talk about them generically, but there's specific counties and each one of these waves and the understanding of that. So when they're coming and what they can expect. So we got this. This is a good reference document for everybody on that. Let's go to the next slide. And I'll turn it over to Christiana to give a quick update.
Thanks, John. So then I walked us through a few pages of information about some of the existing policy commitments. Some of you may have seen this before. We use this in a variety of different meetings. So I'm not going to go through it in any detail. We can go to the next slide and you can just see the second page of it. Basically, we've got a lot of things, and I know counties definitely are well aware of this, in the queue all the way through early 2024. As well as the migration activities happening. We can go to the next slide and the next, there we go. Then we wanted to just kind of talk through the policy implementation timeline. This is something that's always of great interest to legislative staff to kind of understand, what's going on. We frequently talk about it takes 9 to 12 months to get a change in, and that seems like a long time to folks. So we broke that down a little bit so that they can kind of understand more of what goes into that time frame. As well as noting that with these CalWIN migration waves coming up and being so close together, we really have very limited opportunity for policy changes right now. And if we go to the next slide, this was kind of the key takeaway message for folks to understand that with all of the migration work that's happening, all of the policy commitments that are already in the queue, that we are anticipating space for new policy changes starting in the middle of 2024. And then we listed out some of the policy changes that are currently underway, several things that are coming up really soon with the older adult expansion in Medi-Cal, the time clock changes in CalWorks, both happening in May, the work that is going on with the work group on the CalFresh pre-populated SAR-7 form, upcoming elimination of Medi-Cal asset limits, and we also have, it's a little hard to read on this slide, but foster care infant supplement is also listed out there. And then we had an opportunity for questions. If we can just go one more slide forward, just to kind of call everybody's attention to some useful items that are in the appendix. We didn't walk through these in any detail, but they are handy reference documents in terms of the activities that have happened in response to various emergencies, with the public health emergency, the wildfires, the EBT scams, the policies that were implemented in 2020 and 2021, as well as a more expanded listing of the policy commitments that are in the queue right now. So with that, I will turn it back to you, John.
We just wanted to get these items back into the record for JPA. We think these are good reference documents for all of our counties as we move forward to use as briefing documents. Okay. So Michael, that concludes that update.
Great, John. Christiana, a quick question. Were there anything that the legislative staff mentioned as priorities for them, or anything that came out of this in feedback from them?
Michael, I think some questions and context are just around the migration, how it's going, impact on business of some of the rough spots that we talked about on imaging, how is it impacting the counties and the caseworkers, and some discussion on that. And really just an understanding on how things are proceeding. Christiana, did you get any other of the priorities? I think Christiana did a great job, again, addressing that our capacity is full, and really we're looking at mid-2024 for major policy changes.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, is how their reaction was to that.
We didn't really get an opportunity to have much detailed discussion, Mike. We had a 1-hour briefing, so we went through this at not quite the hyperspeed that John and I did today, but it was still pretty compact to kind of walk through all of these slides, as well as, you know, do kind of introductions for everybody, remarks from state partners, all of that within the space of an hour. So it was a little bit jammed. I think historically we've typically had maybe more like 90 minutes and more opportunity for some discussion, but calendars were what they were this year, and everything is just moving, you know, very quickly with the legislative process and the challenges of COVID, as well as some of the construction work that's happening in the Capitol, that's, you know, impacting timing for everybody on all of that work this time.
Great. Well, we're still directionally aligned in what we've told them in the past, so that's actually a good thing. So any other questions or comments from our board members or our state partners on this presentation item? Okay, how about any public comment on this? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the next presentation item. I believe that's project support strategy for the counties. Reporting.
Hi, Michael. Keith Salas is going to provide an update here on this approach, but we have laid out kind of a 4-prong approach for the counties as we talk about the ad hoc reporting and how they can get ready for the migration to Kalsas. So, Keith?
Yep. Thank you, Greg, for that. So for the ad hoc reporting support, we have been having a number of conversations with many of the counties. We want to make sure that we laid out an approach for support. Now, ad hoc support really is meant for 2 things. It's for reporting ad hoc reports as well as peripheral systems. And suffice to say, I'm a conversion manager. It really does represent the county's conversion of their reports and peripheral systems to get to Kalsas. recognizing that Kalsas is the Cowling to Kalsas migration is a traditional conversion. It's fairly complex. There are a lot of moving parts here. So we want to make sure that we had an approach to support them. Well, the first thing that we are going to do, and as mentioned, we've kind of already started this, is education. The first thing that we'll do is we'll talk about the reports that they're currently using. And really, you know, we've done this with Contra Costa and YOLO and Placer, where we've sat down and had a discovery session with them, and that really represents a kickoff of these sessions. What that will do for us is it'll lay out the roadmap, a lot of what we're talking about, everything that we're talking about here. And within that roadmap, we'll be doing certain things like providing overviews of the CLIC Enterprise Solution Reporting Platform, as well as reports that the counties currently use and how we can demonstrate in Kalsas how those are used. And that'll give us better information about just how they're consuming and utilizing those reports. And so that's one of it's a big part of the education that we're going through. And education really kind of flows all the way through here. But the next step that we're looking at doing is the onboarding. When we say onboarding, it's not just rolling them on, it's really making sure that they have access to the sources that they need. So the Kalsas has, obviously, as I mentioned, they're going through a migration and a conversion. They're going to need to understand what the Kalsas database schema tables and columns are. And so we want to make sure that we can get that to them, as well as providing them a data set. And so by the month of April, we are targeting, and I should have highlighted this as well. This right here is a representative sample of the Wave 1 counties, and the Wave 2 counties will follow suit respectively. And I can talk a little bit about that in a second. But by April of this year, what we would like to be able to do is have a data set. We have data sets available now. It's just how are we getting the data set to them? And I can talk about that in a second as well. So providing them tables and columns as well as the data will be very helpful for them, because obviously they need to convert into that respectively or refactor to that. And on refactoring, we have a couple of other repositories of information we think will be helpful to them. One is a data dictionary that's already exists for the counties. The Kalsas data dictionary is something that will explain to them what the definitions of the Kalsas tables are, the columns, some additional details associated with that. The other item that we think is going to be beneficial is the Cowling conversion mapping report. And that comes from the conversion team, and that will highlight for them, how did the conversion design or map from Cowling to Kalsas? And what we'll do is we will work with them in terms of, we'll schedule meetings with each of the respective counties, and we'll walk through an example. So they'll pull up a report, they'll look at a column, and then we'll find that column in the mapping report, and we'll show them just how to use that report. And in that report, it'll show the column in Cowling, our data mapping logic, which we can talk through, and then where does it land essentially on the Kalsas side. And so those two items we believe will be beneficial to them. Some of the counties already have access to this today. We have put this up on, we've called it Forum B in the past, still Forum B. But we're trying to make sure that we're providing that updated version on a routine basis. The one that's out there is the one that they've got today. So I believe Contra Costa may have access to this today. The last type of support is really more of an enhanced type of development support. And this is really intended to be more of where counties need help refactoring their reports. We as a project could help them. And John, I see you jumped on there. I'm not sure if you wanted to provide any context on that.
I think on the whole thing, Keith, it's really that education, the onboarding, giving access to those environments, and then allow and work with the counties as the counties self-serve to refactor.
Correct.
The county finds that out of all those items, there still isn't enough information and things like that and needs supplemental support, this support is available, but it's a county purchase. This isn't in the current scope of work. And we'll have to initiate a county purchase to be able to do that and provide resources to do that refactoring on behalf of the individual county. So it's an enablement strategy to bring it to the point to enable the counties to self-serve. But if the county needs additional support to actually do the refactoring, then or some type of support, we'll work with that county through a county purchase process. So that sort of summarizes the strategy. And Michael, I know that that probably wraps up this agenda item. Keith, is that right? Anything else you wanted? Any other points you wanted to make?
That was it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Michael, I think that brings us to the end of that. And we see that Marla does have a question, as well as Gilbert has a question.
So Marla, go ahead and go first, and then we'll have Gilbert go after you.
Thank you. Thank you for this report. In Solano County, and I know in other counties as well, we use an outside vendor to help us with a lot of our reporting. We use Exemplar. And that's because we haven't been able to get kind of trended data and, you know, dashboards out of a Calwin that we need. And I think we'll get more than we need out of Kalsas, but we still may not get everything from the Kalsas reporting that we need, right? So I'm wondering when can we provide our vendors access to data so that they can start kind of retooling the reports they do for us?
Marla, let us take that one back, because just this week I did receive an email too from Tracy Belton that talked about some work that they have Exemplar doing in San Benito County, which is a current Kalsas county,
Okay.
and some outreach and I think a communication gap that may need to be closed a little bit to do the comparison, and some things that Exemplar may need in order to support. We're not sure if that support is still needed, but I think the way to figure that out is by having a meeting with some of the counties as well as Exemplar to see what gaps exist and then what type of access is needed. So let us sort of close the loop on that. That recently came to my attention this week. And then I think the team's going to have to follow up on that, but we know it's an important item, and Exemplar has served a lot of reporting needs for the counties.
That's great, John. Thanks. And if you need more information from us about, you know, what we're doing, feel free to reach out.
Very good.
Thanks, Gilbert.
Thanks. And I know that when San Bernardino County migrated to Kalsas, we worked very, very closely with the project, trying to, you know, get the data that we were looking for. And we went through a lot of different options and opportunities, and it still was a lengthy process. Just wondering, has there been any refinement to that? You know, I know we had talked about the snowballs. I know we had talked about expanding circuits and adding circuits and all these different kinds of things. But when it was all said and done, after we did the cutover, it was weeks before data was available to us again. So I'm just curious if we've been successful for the Cowling counties to shorten that data void, if you will.
Well, it talks a little bit to the connectivity, and the connectivity, and this is what we're trying to mitigate with doing a lot of this. The connectivity is about 5 months prior to the go live. And so recognizing that the Cowling counties will need access to the schemas of tables and structures, tables and columns, prior to that, we are looking at those creative solutions of either Snowball or putting the data into a Cowling AWS environment where the Cowling counties already have connectivity to. So those are two of the creative or mitigation strategies that we're looking at, and we're getting very close on one or both of those. And so that's what we'll be looking to do. So as I've noted here, between the months of March and April, and by April, our intent is to have this data and structures specifically to wave one, but really to all the counties at that point, because at that point we can provide them whichever converted data set that we want to provide to them.
I'm glad you brought that I'm glad you brought that up, Gilbert. I cannot personally imagine going weeks without data. We have a daily dashboard that we use all the time. I mean, we're looking at our data every single day. So thanks for bringing that up, Gilbert, and good to hear that there's been some progress made there.
Yeah, and that would be just as one who has gone through it to all my Cowling counterparts, just really be mindful of this piece of it, because Marla, to your point, we were down for close to 30 days that we didn't have available data, and we had to use a hodgepodge of things that were available to us to assess where we're at with the workload. We survived, but it wasn't a fun survival test. You know, that there was a lot of things that we had to really work hard and struggle with to get and use. There was things in Kalsas. It just wasn't the things that we were accustomed and used to, and try to really doing our day-to-day monitoring of where the work is, who has the work, how does the work need to be shifted, and things of that nature. So, and part of that was the delay in the data. So if we're able to, as a project, as a team, able to reduce that delay, I think overall the Cowling counties are going to be better. So I just advise my Cowling counterparts to just really be mindful of this piece of cutover.
And what Gilbert's talking about there, that work that we do with our data every day, is directly tied to our timeliness and our ability to meet our timeliness requirements.
I know that our implementation support team from Deloitte has that on the checklist, and I'll be working with the counties on that. Keith and his teams made progress by, Gilbert's right. It was sort of an after effect of saying, how are we going to get this data to repopulate? And it was a significant amount of data that took weeks to be able to do that. Keith talked about a physical device, which is called a snowball, as well as starting early and different options for that. And the Deloitte team is going to be engaging with each of the individual counties on the implementation readiness checklist to make sure that those strategies are identified. I think what Keith's put out here is really important. The first thing is education. What do you need to retool? What dashboards do you need to be rebuilt or already exist there? What reports are going to your board that don't already exist in Kalsas? And there's going to be a gap, but we want to make sure that you're refactoring the right reports and the right systems to be able to do that and not doing unnecessary work. So the education, the onboarding, and then you'll have a real idea of what refactoring you needs to have, and then the opportunity for additional support if necessary.
Thank you.
Do we have any other speakers or questions from our board members or our state partners on this presentation item? Any public comment on this? Okay, John, I think we've got our marching orders. This is clearly an area of concern that we need to shore up. So I'm glad the team's going to focus on this.
We'll keep this on future agendas, Michael, and keep tracking it here as well.
Thank you.
All right, getting to our next one, and we're going to give an update on the risks that we went over at the January 27th membership meeting. And Greg and Rachel are going to give that update.
Yeah, thanks, John. And yeah, it will be a team effort here as we go through the risk. And as we talked about in January, when we presented the risk, we wanted to provide transparency into what we're doing on the project, what are the key risks that we see, and steps that we are taking to mitigate or ensure that that we can avoid those becoming an issue. So the first set of risks that you see on this page are likely familiar. They are all items that we were tracking for our C4 cutover. And as we got through our readiness processes for C4, we actually saw most of these dropped in severity level from a high to a medium. And that was a result of the efforts by the team to mitigate and address the issues. As we finish up C4, we did raise these back to high so that we ensure that we have the same level of focus on this for the Cowling counties. So over time, I'm sure that we will see some of these drop down. However, as I said, each of these you may have seen before with the C4 cutover. The first two risks that are here are related to performance of both the reporting, the dashboard analytics, And the second is our core batch processing, so risk 236 and 237. So we're managing these very closely together because they are related and both have to fit within our overall batch window. So we've had a number of things on this front. First and foremost, we recently upgraded the database to Oracle version 19C. And with that, there's additional performance improvements that have come in with that database. In addition to that, we have also developed our roadmap of items that we want to implement for as we head into wave 1 conversion and the following waves. As we've looked at that roadmap and the changes that we've identified, whether it's related to super triggers or some of the reporting changes that we've seen, we are actually forecasting right now that we are going to be able to shrink our batch window on a nightly basis by about an hour and a half. So 90 minutes it's going to come out. So from that perspective, we feel like we're in very good shape for wave 1. However, we're going to be implementing these changes now. So some of these will go in later this month, and some will go in the April timeframe. And then we will go through a couple of rounds of performance testing for the wave 1 through 6 for the Cowling counties. Our first wave of testing will be in the May timeframe. So it'll actually be May through July. And we will be testing with a 43 county data set to ensure that we're ready for wave 1. Once we're finished with that, and while we're doing our cutover for wave 1, we'll actually be performance testing for wave 2. And there will be some tuning that we'll be doing with that as well. And then once we get through wave 2, we're going to do a combined test for the 58 counties to get us for waves 3 through 6. Because by the time we get to wave 3, we don't have the luxury of time there. So we're going to be, consolidating that. And I will point out that while we have this roadmap and we know the changes that we're going to make right now, we do anticipate the roadmap will continue to evolve as we identify future changes and tuning opportunities, because we know as we make a change here, that's going to change the overall profile of the processing, and we may see contingent in a different spot that we have to address. So we're prepared for that. That's why we're including additional time in our schedule for that testing.
Greg, this is Michael. That's what I was going to touch on is I know when we start making updates to certain core functions, it does have a ripple effect, and wanted to find out how you guys are being able to isolate that so that if we're changing 4 or 5 different things, upgrading our Oracle component, making some changes to the design, we can isolate which one's problematic in the testing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's going to be the focus of the testing as we put these individual changes in to see where it makes change has an effect. So for instance, when we put in the changes that are anticipated for super triggers, we think that's going to remove about 30 minutes out of our processing. So some things are going to run sooner than they had in the past, and they may generate contention with others. So we're going to be very vigilant about additional tuning that we need to do there. So we certainly expect that. We have resources lined up for that, and that's why we've included additional time in the schedule. Risk 256, I'm going to let Arnold talk more about this when he provides an update on imaging, but this is specifically related to imaging scalability. We have been going through an enhanced performance testing as we're preparing for the LA County cutover on imaging, and results there have been pretty encouraging. I think up to 125% of volume. So more than the 58 county volume the team has actually been able to run through and have been able to meet the SLAs. And I know I'm stealing a little bit of Arnold's thunder, so I'll let him cover off on that when he provides an update there. And then risk 258 is related to our cutover window. If you recall, we are targeting an 84-hour cutover window. That was the same window that we had for C4. And while I'm sure people are looking at it going, well, you're only doing 3 counties now versus 38 counties or 39 counties before, why is it still going to take 84 hours? And the reason for that is the process itself is going to be more complex because we are going from a different data model in the Cowling systems over to the Kalsas system. So we are anticipating that even though we have fewer counties, we are still going to need roughly that same outage window to get through the full conversion. So the team is currently working on their cutover plans right now and putting together the detailed schedule for each of those cutover waves. So it'll be a step-by-step, just like we had for the C4 cutover. And then we are preparing for our first mock conversion that'll be coming up. So that mock conversion itself will help us dial in around where do we think we are fitting within that 84-hour window, and what adjustments that we can make. So the team will be watching this very closely, and we will have more updates on this in the coming months. If we go to the next slide, we have 3 new risks that are more specific to Cowling versus C4. We did talk about these last month during the January meeting. However, 263 is around converted data tests. As we've gone through that first round of conversion, we have seen a higher number of defects that has been identified during the specific testing that we're doing for that. So the team has been mobilizing additional resources on that, ensuring that we are validating and reviewing and triaging each of the defects to understand what the complexity is and putting together a plan and approach to address it. So right now we have the majority of the severity 1 and 2 defects that we think would be an impact to UAT are scheduled to be delivered with our golden data set 6. And then we will have another round that will be coming in with golden data set 7. So we have that in place. So we know what our schedule is and we have a burn down that we can track. And we've also taken our converted data resources while they're waiting for the next data set, and we have them embedded in with the conversion team. So they're actually spending time helping them test in the conversion environment so that we can confirm that the defects are fixed before we go through the process of generating a full data set and migrating it to the next environment. So that's an important step in my mind because it's helping to improve our fixed reliability as we look at individual defects. So we are also looking at contingency plans. So in the event that we get into UAT and we do find a conversion defect, likely we will, how is it that we will go about and do a hot fix and get that data corrected in the UAT environment? So those are all some of the items that are moving forward around this. So we are making good progress. This is still a high priority risk that we are monitoring and watching very closely. And one thing I forgot to mention on the previous slide, but it's fine here, is that we are addressing these and managing these on a weekly basis through our risk management group. So every Wednesday, we are taking a checkpoint on where we're at with each of these risks and how we're improving along those lines. Risk 268 is a new one, and it's really related to a combination, or it's almost a risk regarding the risks. Because as we've looked at each of these individual ones, right, it would be too easy to get kind of focused on that individual tree and maybe miss the forest. So what we've done is we've created a new risk 268 that's kind of focused on the overall forest so that we can take that end-to-end look on what the risks are. And I believe Wendy Batterman is on. So Wendy, if you would like to provide a quick update on this risk as well.
Hi, everybody. So yeah, so 268, as Greg was saying, is kind of this umbrella risk that covers 8 different risks that we're monitoring closely. So what we're looking at, while each of the 8 risks have mitigation strategies that they will be implementing to correct for each one of those different risk efforts, we are looking at if any of those risks actually turn to an issue, what we need to do to be able to make adjustments if we need to. So this risk actually covers basically the contingency planning for those. So what our team is looking at right now across all the different teams is what are some of those options if we had to make adjustments? What does that look like? What is impacted? What's affected? And then what are some of those trigger dates for the different risks and the different efforts of when we will not have enough information to make a decision if it was needed. So again, this is just part of good project management to look at all the risks that we have, look at where they might switch over. And if they do, we're able to actually pivot and make some better some quick adjustments. So more to come on that one as we get further into our planning effort. So back to you, Greg.
Thanks, Wendy. So we are going to move on to risk 269, and actually I'm going to let Rachel speak to this one for us.
Perfect. Thanks, Greg. And Keith actually took a little bit of this before, so I'm not going to spend too much on 269, but we have heard from the counties about the concerns around their ability to be able to refactor the reports. And Keith had pointed out that there are a number of things that we are putting in place as a strategy to give the counties enough time and enough support, for that matter, so that they can get those reports needed. So on day one, the ones that are really, really critical that they're going to need are going to be in their hands, and they will be ready and there for the counties to use. And so the risk really focuses on the areas that Keith had talked about and making sure that there is upfront education and awareness of what the tool is, understanding what the reports are, understanding what the data structures are, what data is available, so that the counties can make decisions about what they need to do to refactor their reports, getting the counties onboarded, and then providing, if there is the option of the counties needing that additional support, that there is that availability as well that the counties are going to be provided with. We are going to be including that as the teams are going out and having conversations with the counties. If there's an identification that that refactoring support is needed, that's going to be something that the implementation support team is going to start to track, so that we get early insights into that and we're not waiting until later stages in the process, but it's something that we're going to add as an item for a dependency to get that identified from the counties. If we could move to the next slide, we'll move into our medium risks, and I'm going to take the next one on 262. 262 was identified as a risk where the counties have indicated that there's more detailed information needed to understand the county-specific efforts and what they need to complete before they go live. And we had included a work plan overall for the project, but what had been requested from the counties was to give the counties a county-specific work plan. And we have released that county-specific work plan for the Wave 1 counties. We've received some feedback on it, some updates that need to be made to the work plans to give the county some additional information so that they can hit those timelines as we get up into the point of October. And so the team has been working on getting those work plans updated. The future waves can expect that those work plans are going to be made available at T-12. That's the first time when the counties are actually going to have their individual county work plans that relate to the activities to have them onboarding onto Kalsas. At T-10 is when the counties are getting their readiness checklist, and the Wave 1 counties have received their checklist. We've also received feedback on the checklist for the Wave 1 counties and are going back and adding in some additional information. One thing to note, the differences between the two is that the work plan is really more so a schedule and a sequence to understand where all of the interactions across the project take place, whereas the checklist is helping to understand, are we ready for very specific activities to go live? So there is a distinction and a unique need for each of these items. Aside from that, what the team has been putting together also is a readiness dashboard and packet. And I had mentioned that at the last board meeting that that's going to be what we're going to track for all of us to see visually how all of the project readiness as well as the county readiness activities are coming together in that readiness dashboard. And that T-5 is when we start our governance meetings, the formal meetings to know where we are as we move forward. And then there are also additional support efforts the counties are getting in the form of toolkits as well. So all of this holistically, there's a lot to get the counties prepared. We're constantly getting feedback and taking that feedback and incorporating it and then applying it to future waves as well. 264, Greg, I'm going to turn this one over to you to talk about the imaging migration.
Okay, great, thank you. So imaging migration is all around the focus for each of the individual counties, the Cowling counties, getting their data and migrating them into the Highland system. So we are tracking this because, of course, getting that data over is going to be critical for our success for each of the counties to go live. Right now, things are going very well on this front. We have specific milestones for each of the counties within the first couple of waves for when they're going to be doing certain things related to extracting their images and sending them over to us. And we're also applying some of the lessons learned from our C4 cutover, which is how we can do things kind of over the wire as opposed to leveraging a snowball, which is the device that John talked about earlier to transfer data, because we did encounter some problems with that during the C4. So given that we've got a little bit more time and we can address it on a wave by wave basis, we're using that approach. The teams are also sharing a lot of information, lessons learned from the C4, as well as from county to county, how they can share how the process will work for them and what adjustments we can make. So a lot of focus on how we can do retrospective and ensure that those best practices are kind of shared across the board.
Craig, this is Michael. On that front, we had a lot of experience with you guys with the snowballs and over the line as well for LA County's move, because it was 200+ million images. So I know there should be some lessons learned coming out of that, but I was also thinking about runway for certain counties where they might, because we made some significant infrastructure improvements in terms of the line, the quality of the line that could be used, and maybe the counties would have to have a heads up if they need to do that, because they go through their county IT or something to get prepared, just to make sure that we've given them, adequate time frame to get out in front of it.
Thanks, Michael. I'll make a note of that so that we can share that with the team. And I see Arnold has come off mute, so he's got a point he wants to
That's
make.
actually been part of our discussions very early with the counties in dealing and deciding if we're using snowballs, if we're using network connections. Luckily, most of those counties have a lot smaller data load that goes, so a lot of them are going over the wire, but that's definitely part of the evaluation process very early in the waves planning.
Thank you, Arnold. If we'll move to the next slide, we have two more risks that we wanted to share. I'll cover the first one here, and then Rachel will be covering risk 270. 267 is related to the GAGR functionality, and we've logged a risk, tracking progress of that, knowing that we have to have that functionality delivered by May for heading into UAT. We had originally planned to have most of that functionality delivered in March. However, we've had to slide a little bit of it to May because there's some more work that's been required to get those designs done. So we are progressing well against our revised schedule. We have added additional resources. Our Gainwell partners have really added a number of resources and working closely with us and Lisa's team, Lisa Salas and the application development team, to get this done. We've also focused on increasing our turnaround time on reviews of designs and so forth. So that's helping us. And the other key thing that we're doing is looking to expedite any data model changes so that the conversion team has those and we can address those in enough time within UAT. We're also having some conversations just from a contingency standpoint, collaborating with the UAT team so that, if some things slide beyond May, what are options for us to deliver those last minute components in the UAT and still fit within the overall UAT window. So good progress is being made here to mitigate this risk. And of course, we'll continue to monitor this closely. Rachel?
270, thanks, Greg. And this one is a new one as well. We haven't talked about this one at the board meeting yet. One of the items that the ISS team is producing is what is called a change discussion guide. And what the change discussion guides are intended to do is to provide supervisors in the counties an understanding of the changes that are going to be in Kalsas that apply to an individual's role. And to really understand it from a process perspective. The team has been drafting the change discussion guides, and we sent it out for some feedback to the counties to get some preliminary feedback as to what their reactions were. And there's varying, I'll say varying reactions in terms of need about how much detail to include, how much to focus on the change, how much to not focus on the change. And so we've been soliciting that feedback, and the team is incorporating now that feedback for the Wave 1 counties to make sure that we are addressing what needs to be included in the change discussion guide. It's fundamental to our approach to make sure that we're listening to the people that are actually going to be using these materials. Much like we do with Benefits Cal and user-centered design, we take a human-centered approach to making sure that we're getting the feedback that we need and incorporating that into these guides as we move forward. From where this needs to be, just to give everybody a little bit of orientation, these guides are going to be pretty critical as the counties start training. So from a timeline viewpoint, the guides are going to be that preliminary information that the supervisors will have so that they can understand and help their staff prepare for the change. That's really what these guides are intended to do. So we're keeping track of this as a risk. Given the feedback that's been received on the change discussion guides to date, it's something that the team is continuing to go back and refine, but it's something that we believe that we need to monitor ongoing just based off of some of the preliminary feedback. And Michael, I believe that closes out our risk list.
Well, it's very robust, so we're going to be tracking this closely, expecting a lot of improvement and updates on this going forward. But I think this is really important to keep in front and center for all of us, because this is our one way to kind of keep everybody's eyes on what we have to still deal with heading into these separate go lives. So I appreciate having the transparency around this. So thanks. Any other comments or questions from our board members or state partners on that presentation item?
Michael, I would just say, this is Becky in Region 3. I really appreciate the consortia's forward looking and using the past experiences of our go lives through some of the other counties, and how that helps them plan and what their next steps are for the future go lives. So I really, really appreciate that forward thinking that they're doing and the effort and the time. I know it's not something quick and easy, and that it takes a lot of time to look at those evaluations, and your team has done a phenomenal job. So thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Becky. We want a continuous improvement, constant improvement. Any other comments or input or even questions from our board members or state partners?
Hi, this is Marla. I have a question. Thank you. I have a question about, let me say it this way. Something has recently come to our mind that we just hadn't thought about before, and that was the impact on our induction training of the conversion. So we start induction classes once a quarter. We're kind of, we're a small county, medium-sized county, but we think we're going to have to miss one quarter because you can't be training a class to Cowling and they come out to Kalsas, right? So we're going to have to front load one of our classes. We don't have enough approved FTEs for that. So I just wonder if that is part of the preparation documents that you're working on counties with and part of the readiness plan.
It is part of the readiness plan, Marla. That's something that I'll bring back to the training team as well, just to make sure that they've noted that also. But it is something that's part of that overall preparatory information for the counties. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
And Marla, I know that we have an additional action item, probably from another meeting, to follow back up through our training team, regional managers, of sort of a list of existing training materials that counties can start to leverage for induction training that are available and things like that. So that's something else that impacts induction training. Also for the 39, that we need to make sure that all training departments know all of the resources that are out there that they can pull from.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, Marla, because I think that's a global issue or concern depending on where your rollout falls. And what you have in your calendar, because we have not just induction training, but you may have training very specific to imaging or to some of the other solutions that may be changing. So I think it's really important for all the directors to be aware of that and to make make conscientious decisions on how much investment of time is put into it and where do you do it. So you're right. You're probably going to have to make that adjustment and not send them to training and then send them back to training.
Yeah.
We have a similar challenge ourselves in terms of time. Any other input from our board members or our state partners? Very good discussion here. Okay, any public comment? Okay, then I think we're on to a technical discussion on multi-factor authentication.
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon. This is Esparza. I want to give you guys an update as to where we are with our MFA rollout. So I'm pleased to report that as of end of January, we have completed the rollout all the way through the various use cases, all the way down to our county users, which means MFA is now enabled for all of our Kalsas services. Since rollout, we've had, on a daily about 60,000 successful logins. For the first week, we did provide a support bridge to handle any real-time issues that any of the county users were facing at that time. And as of the reporting period highlighted here, we've had about 40 incidents received and resolved. I do have a tip for all our county users who are currently on the Kalsas system. We do have, as part of a requirement, a 20-minute timeout. So if you are inactive within any of the Kalsas services for more than 20 minutes, you are prompted to re-log into the system. When you are prompted to re-log in, our MFA does kick in. And so I just want to make sure that folks keep that in mind as you're working throughout the day. If we can move on to the next slide, we have received feedback around the rollout and looking forward to working with each one of the counties to further improve their experience. 2 items that the team is currently looking to see how we can best resolve is one is the actual policy around MFA. As I explained on the previous slide, this is tied to your login, and login is tied into inactivity. And so we're looking to see if there's a way for us to be able to keep track of the fact that you're in for a longer period. Maybe you went in on the morning and try to minimize the MFA that you do throughout the day. So that is being investigated and discussed internally. The other point that we're looking into is to provide a more consistent experience. We do have a series of third-party products, such as our Imaging Highland solution, as well as Click, our reporting solution, that do have their own technical implementations as to how they're handling keeping that 20-minute counter. So we're trying to work with our third-party partners on how to provide a more seamless experience for our users. So I'm going to pause to see if there's any questions.
No, I think you actually, the one I was going to bring up was you said you guys are looking into these other alternatives. That was something that we asked for because of the potential business impact of having to re-authenticate through MFA multiple times throughout the day, especially if they're navigating between meds and Kalsas, or if they're going over to the imaging system and coming back. So we really want to make sure that they're not spending time doing administrative logins when really that could be mitigated. So I want to emphasize that that's an important look for everyone. Gilbert's has his hand up.
Thanks, Michael. I have one question and then like a comment. And on the slide before, it talked about 40 incidents. What were the type? Is there like the theme of the incidents, or was there a particular situation that users experienced? 40 is not a lot out of 60,000. So just curious if there was anything in particular on those 40 instances.
So yeah, so a general theme we had on the 40 incidents was folks not receiving the one-time password. So our implementation pattern for this was you received the one-time password for MFA via email. And so we did receive incidents around folks not receiving them. When investigating those, we received bounce backs from their local IT servers, email servers. So that puts them, the carrier puts you on a suppression list. So we have to remove you to get you back in. So there is further investigation that we're working with local IT on to understand what is the local email server configuration and what's going on. But those were the majority of the incidents that were coming in. It was those folks within that, 2 to 5 minutes, they just were not receiving the email. So we had to track those down.
Luce, in the MFA implementation, does it offer them choices of how to receive it? Like they could elect text as a method?
So for Kalsas, we've gone with the email option.
Okay, just take a look at that if that plays into this, because that gets rid of the county infrastructure issue. So just when you're looking at all the alternatives to try to make it less burdensome on the users, we might want to look at different alternatives like that.
And Michael, we have been looking at that, and one of the challenges that we have there is distributing that via text, or even the authentication app requires use of the personal devices. And so that's where you get into the legislative corundum of being able to do that. So that's some of our limiting factors that we're looking at as we see other alternatives.
Okay, I only mention it because for LA County's MFA, we do allow text. So it just might be something to take a close look at.
Yes.
And that was my point, that I appreciate the feedback on the incidences. And that was my point that I wanted to make, is that, it sounds like from the feedback that I received, at least in San Bernardino County, there has been very, very few issues with the MFA, which is a very reassuring note. But what we have noticed, and this is our own fault, if you will, is that there has been times where our local server is down or our Outlook is down, and so we cannot get into email. And if we can't get into email, we can't get into the MFA. So having some type of alternative way, and maybe it's some type of app that is on the computer or something like that, to where where there's just another option, because we were struggling to get some of our users who were in office down, that the system was down and they couldn't get into their emails. And that's, I know it's a local issue, but still it's an MFA issue because we can't get to the email.
That's a very good point. I'm
Add it to our
glad
list.
Gilbert gave a real good, clear example, I think, of where we could have an unintended impact of having something locally keeping them out of Kalsas. So this is a good discussion. Thank you. Any other feedback from anybody so far on this? I know you're still going, right, Luce?
Actually, this is the end. My whole key here is, we received the feedback, we acknowledged, we're working on those two. I got the third one around alternative ways, and I think we'll have to work with each one of the counties as to what could that be based on legislature and all that good stuff. So I'll add that to our list.
And Michael, we'll take it back as an action item to follow up. It might not be an agenda item, but we'll have an action item to follow up on those specific items to that board.
Thank you very much, you guys, for taking it seriously. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, were there any other comments on this presentation? Any public comment? Okay, then we'll move on. Thank you, Luz, for that. I think that brings us to update on production, Kalsas imaging and preparations. Oh boy, okay.
So I'll continue on from here. So hello, everybody. My name's Arnold Maldick. I'm the Accenture System Architect Manager for the Kalsas application. So I'll give you the update on the imaging system for both production for the 39 C4 counties, as well as we look forward to the LA County go live. So we are currently focusing on 4 key tasks as we prepare for LA. One is around the enhanced performance testing so that we can take the lessons learned out of the C4 go live and put additional stress and additional conditions onto the system using LA volumes and C4 county volumes. We're also focusing on the Los Angeles County migrated image, both completing the migration from the existing system as well as the validation of those. Then we introduced a new testing phase or validation phase around what's called the model office, and we're also completing the UAT because in the fall, there were a couple defects that were still left open. And then the final emphasis area is just around the training around both the instructor-led as well as the web-based training. So I'll be going into more detail in each of these areas if we can move on to the next slide. So from an overall enhanced performance testing, we had a series of successful tests, and what we are seeing is that at 125% of 58 county volume load, the system remained performant. So if you look at where we are right now, once you add LA County, we'd be at about 60% volume of the full 58 county volume. So we have a significant amount of headroom in the system. And so we saw average response times in the 100 millisecond to the 2.5 seconds, which is within the expectations. Benefits Cal confirmed that their response times were about 188 milliseconds, so very responsive. And so what we see is that from a load perspective and a performance perspective, at that significantly above expected load, the system was still performing, which is a good thing. We did identify some areas in a couple of the applications that can be tuned further. And we're going to be executing another round of that performance testing next week after that tuning is complete, and to be able to validate the improvements there as well. So overall, very solid progress. If we move on to the next slide, please. Then we also are focusing in on the defects that are providing a poor user experience on the C4 counties and getting those resolved in preparation for just a better user experience on the C4s and ensuring that LA does not encounter the same issues. And those defects are really categorized into document visibility, which means users can or cannot see documents. So as John had talked about before, there was another deletion event that occurred in January to where there were 42,000 documents that were left in a state that were not visible by the county users. Those have since been restored and processed through workflow, and that occurred last Friday. There's also a document searchability to where there are defects that are forcing county users to use alternate means for searching and finding those documents. One of those has been resolved already. The other two are going to be resolved prior to 3/4. And so from that perspective, we'll be able to decommission those workarounds and the system will be functioning as intended. Another of the defects that is focused on is delays in workflow. And so in some cases, there's been a 4-hour delay in the images making it through the workflow process to the final state. And the change for that is actually scheduled to go in tonight after more testing. We did find an issue that had to be resolved, which is why it didn't go in on 2/11. And then the last component is around impacts to usability. And so this is starting to take advantage of some of the benefits of the Highland solution with mass scanning and being able to segment the documents. And so there's a number of these items that have various implementation dates. Some have already been resolved, such as the return mail intermittently being marked as received. That has already been resolved. The other component of it is the display issues while using Internet Explorer. There's an upgrade that's going to be occurring so that the primary browsers will be Microsoft Edge or Chrome. And so that's going in on 3/3. So the main theme is we're hyper-focused on improving the usability and the caseworker experience for both the 39 counties so that LA can also benefit from that. Let's move on to the next slide, please. The other area that we're focusing is just on the import and the migration from the existing Los Angeles County imaging system to the new Kalsas imaging system. And so we have hit our milestones there. We have used snowballs for the bulk of the transfers. And what we can see, there's a flat line there on the orange line, and that's because we actually loaded all the images off the snowballs, produced a report, provided it to Nextlogica, who is helping LA with the export, so that they could run a differential and give us a new file over the wire or network transferred that contains the images that either failed import or were missing import. So that's where you see the orange line starting to tick up again. So we have completed that. This chart is roughly 5 days old and are going into the next round of the differential, which will provide the images through December of 2021. And then once those are complete, we'll do the other bulk, which will be from January forward. And then at that point, we'll get into more, as we approach the go live event, more of a real-time synchronization of the images on a daily basis to be able to keep the system in sync so that when we go live with LA, all the images will have been migrated over.
So Arnold, this is Michael, when I'm looking at this chart, so that dip down below, is that equivalent with down at the bottom where it says missing bad documents from initial import, and it's like 454,000?
That's right. And so those have been imported already.
So they've been reloaded and imported and verified?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So then, so that's the LA import from an imaging perspective. And then we go into the model office. And really the model office is designed so that Los Angeles County can confirm process flow. We know there's centralized imaging as well as the FCR process. And so it's the opportunity to validate that process against the imaging solution as we go through. And really the key is around the testing of the physical scanners, watching items go through the workflow, user security rights, the benefits cal document flow, auditing, and then the final retest of the UAT. If we move to the next slide, I'll give you some update or voiceover on where we actually stand. So of the 60 county developed scripts right now, one is in started state, 52 have passed, 1 is failed, and 6 are withdrawn. And so we are currently working through LA County on the 1 failed item on that model office to determine how we address that. From a UAT perspective, the 3 retests and the 4 are also in process and expected to be complete within the week. So making good progress there. As I said, there's 1 item that we are currently working through discussions with LA as to how to address. We move on to the next slide, please. So overall, the success criteria that will go into our green light process will be 100% pass rate on the UAT, successful completion of the model office scripts, and then no open priority, high or non-cosmetic defects in the solution as we go forward. Let's move on to the next slide. So I've already covered this in prior JPA, so I won't drain the slide, but this is really focusing on the training aspect and the preparation of the LA County workers for the system. So there is a full library of web-based training materials. We move on to the next slide. We're also doing increment, or the training library continues to be enhanced based upon the C4. And we've basically condensed some of the training curriculum into the imaging light curriculum made up of the 3 core WBTs. And then also we're tracking completion of this so that we can see who's in the learning management system, who's actually taking the training, so that LA County supervisors can ensure that the caseworkers and the other workers are fully ready to when we go live. We move on to the next slide, please. In addition to that, we have been producing imaging guides, fact sheets, and videos that have been consumed by both the C4 counties, the 39 counties already on the solution, and also that are available for the Los Angeles County users as well. So this is in addition to the initial set of WBTs that were created. We move to the next slide, please. Also in light, or what's occurring is that we're doing the imaging train, the SME, the ITSMEs. And so that training started on the 9th and it's going to be going through the 24th. It offers hands-on as well. So there's the web-based and there's the hands-on components. We move on to the next slide, please. And that's really the summary of where we are. So we're making good progress along the system preparation, the defect resolution, the image loads, as well as the training. Michael John, I'll hand it over to you.
So Arnold, when will we really know or have a level of assurance, when will we hit the period of all the testing being relatively completed to know if we're going to make our March 14th date?
I'm expecting the testing to be complete at the end of next week, which is the next round of the performance testing. And then we have to finish working through that 1 item in model office to determine what the solution is on that and the associated time frame. So that's the 1 outstanding item.
Okay, so that'll put us at about the first week of March.
Right. So roughly 2 weeks ahead of the go live date.
Okay. I just want to have some kind of an idea on that.
Michael, we're going to have to make some decisions on restarting the communications on benefits cal out to the public as well. So I think we're going to have to do a little risk reward assessment on that.
Yeah, and that's where I was kind of going to. I was talking with Antonia about it, and she's a little leery about sending it out if we don't know or have a high confidence level, which is a good point. So that's why I was trying to ballpark when we would have a relatively good assurance about what our probability of success is. It looks like that first week of March. So yeah, we've got about 2-week window for notification.
Okay. And Arnold, I know that our partners from Highland, Jeff Harrell, is on as well. And I always like hearing from Highland and know that they're working through these defects and hand in hand with the team. Jeff, any items you want to point out to our JPA board? And I think you're still on mute, Jeff.
How about now? Can you hear
You're
me now?
good.
Yeah,
There
I
you
was
go.
sorry about that. I was double muted. No, I just wanted to reiterate what Arnold had said, that you know, we're partnering very closely with the Accenture and ClearBest team to ensure that all of the fixes get in and that they're thoroughly tested and that everything is working as designed. So the team is working very, very diligently, very hard to ensure that all these things are completed prior to the go live, and that we are fully on board to do whatever it takes to make sure that happens. So.
I appreciate making sure our vendors are bringing everything to the table on this, just because of how much risk is involved when we migrate LA. So I appreciate having Highland here, having our partners from Accenture here, and I'm going to be looking really closely when we get into that first week of March on where we're at. So thank you.
Yes, you bet.
I think Gilbert has his hand up.
Yes, Gilbert.
Thank you. I had a question way back on slide 54, and because that's the slide that talks about the testing and what appears to be some pretty good outcomes on the testing so far, the enhanced performance testing. I guess what my question is, and I'm not professing to be smart in this arena here, but how do we ensure that the testing is as close to real life testing as possible? Because it's one thing to say that the system is functioning and responding like it's supposed to, but is it a real life test scenario where we have, 20, 30, 40, 1,000 users accessing the system at the same time, trying to pull up images, upload images, the customers uploading images? How do we know that this testing is as close to real life as possible, and we should anticipate the same outcomes in real life?
Yeah, Gilbert. So that was actually one of our focus areas as we started the planning for this revised performance test coming out of our C4 go live. And so we actually have modeled or modified the system load. And we've actually been doing concurrent loads of benefit cal images, as well as modeling the user or the bulk scanning in addition to general user activity. So we've looked at the usage patterns of the C4 counties since go live in production. We've also worked with LA to obtain their usage patterns, and that is how we revised what was being tested, the flows that were being tested, so that it was mirroring what we expect out of the system after LA goes live. And that's when we also took the volumes up beyond. So we talked about the system was performing at 125%. That's 125% of the expected volume when all 58 counties are live. After LA goes live, we'll be at about 60 to 65% of that. So there's a significant headroom there on the system performance. So there's been a lot of focus, and that's actually why we've actually invested another couple of weeks in that performance testing, because we actually were doing some additional tuning of that usage pattern and spreading the load across the transactions that we're actually seeing to verify that what we see in this performance test is a very good approximation of what we expect to see after LA goes live.
And Gilbert, in the meeting we had with the project as well, we asked, and the project's been working on that and putting in our end-to-end testing environments and in the model office environments, database sizing, load in there similar, so that they're not distinctively ignoring what the actual volume would be when they're doing their testing. So they're in the process of putting load and also putting database sizing into those environments so that when we run our end-to-ends, it's not just end-to-end on a light environment. That's right.
And in the next week's testing, we'll have LA users on the system as well doing normal transactions as we're putting the systemic load on it as well.
Well, I appreciate that, and I like I said, I know this is a big deal for all of us, and so I was just curious because I like I said, I'm not smart in this arena, so I just needed to have some insight on how we get the testing to what real life examples would be. Thanks, I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So had we reached the end, Arnold?
We have.
Okay, so Gilbert, thanks for bringing that up. And I did want to highlight that because I was thinking the same thing, and our vendor partners are responding and being able to create something that's as real as possible before we go ahead and go live for LA. And that'll be something that will be offered and learned and incorporated in for future waves too. So we're going to build upon that. Any other comments or questions from our board members or state partners on this very important presentation?
Michael, I would just say, as far as the imaging, I know that, for our smaller counties that we have definitely had some challenges with it, but I really appreciate the support that we have also received from the consortia to work through those challenges. John's team has really stepped in and helped us figure out what's happening, how to brainstorm through those. And I also appreciate that they are stress testing at the capacity of what it will be when LA goes live. So I think those are really key steps for us as we continue to go through. And I know that the teams are also working through some guides and helps that they're sharing regularly that have been integral to our progress in the imaging and have seen great leaps and bounds as we have improved throughout going live. So thank you.
Thanks, Becky. Anyone else have any comments or questions from our board members or state partners? Okay, how about public comment on this side? Okay, hearing none, we're going to go ahead and move to the next agenda item, and I believe that brings in benefits Cal.
It does. Thanks, Michael. So the other half of getting LA ready for the 14th of March, just wanted to provide a couple of updates. Our current execution, we have actually executed all of the test cases effective today, even though it says 97%. There are 19 test cases that are in a failure status at this point. There's a meeting next week with Kalsas, with Benefits Cal, and with the consortium in county to walk through those remaining items to determine the path forward to bring those to closure. So this execution rate includes end-to-end. It's not just the Benefits Cal portion, but it's Benefits Cal and Kalsas is reflected in that overall pass rate. From a technical viewpoint, I think that Arnold had just talked at length about performance testing. The isolated performance tests for Benefits Cal are done. What this reflects, the 80% completion, is that end-to-end performance test between Benefits Cal and Highland. So we ended up extending additional cycles of testing. As Arnold pointed out, next week we have an endurance test. Our team has gone back 3 or 4 or 5 times to confirm our assumptions around usage patterns to make sure that we're solid on the usage patterns. And what we've accounted for in terms of our usage patterns is actually a growth factor. So while we looked at what the current usage patterns are in YBN and Benefits Cal today, we also made assumptions around growth with increasing adoption with a new solution that's going out. So we've got a pretty hefty upper bound in terms of what we plan for our usage statistics. But that next week endurance test is the piece that we really need to get through to close this portion out. If we could go to the next slide, I'll give a little bit of an update on where we are relative to communications. And Michael, you and John had brought this up previously. We have put on hold the communications to the customers around the release date, and that was pending the outcome of the performance test. So right now that is put on hold, but we have sent out the information that we're going to send out to the public for translation. And then we can share that out once we've made the decision when we want to let the public know. So that is what is pending on the communications front right now. We're going to move to the next slide. I can talk a little bit about training. We are proceeding forward with our awareness session for the community-based organizations. So next week is when we are having that session with the CBOs in Los Angeles. There's been interest in some of the state CDSS CBOs to engage in that conversation as well, so that they can get familiar. So that's what's planned for next week to get our CBOs ready. And then if we move to the last slide, we'll talk a little bit about post go live support. So we do have plans for daily calls that are going to be available where there's support to make sure that if there are questions that are coming in from the counties, that we have those daily calls stood up. And then we have twice weekly calls as well for additional questions that are following the first week and a half after go live. So that's what we look at readiness related to Benefits Cal. And I'm going to turn it back to you, Michael, for that was the update for Benefits Cal for LA Go Live.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I have a question about the, it was a couple of slides back when you were talking about the end-to-end testing. And you said you were looking at usage patterns in LA. And I was wondering, you mentioned YBN, but what have you guys looked at in terms of the usage patterns coming in through the mobile app? And is there anything that's been unique with sizes, things that have been done that way? Because that's going away completely for users, and they're going to start using Benefits Cal for that purpose.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned, Michael, looking at both of them. I think I clubbed them into YBN when I know that the mobile app is there as well. But we did look at usage patterns where we see people checking their EBT balances pretty frequently at the beginning of the month, document uploads. So we've included the current usage and then a significant growth factor just because we're trying to drive adoption for more people to use Benefits Cal. So we've added in quite a bit.
Okay, so we picked that up. Okay, good. I just didn't want that to be an afterthought.
Sure.
Okay, great. Any comments, questions from our board members or state partners on the Benefits Cal update? Okay, any public comment on that presentation and update? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on. And I believe that brings us to readiness and milestone implementation readiness for Cowling Wave 1. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
You did, and I'm gonna, Greg is gonna join me for this. Greg and I are gonna give a bit of an update on where we stand relative to readiness for Wave 1 for conversion, the overall system. We'll take a look at the technical readiness as well as training, change, and implementation too. So Greg is going to kick us off on the conversion side.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. And as you may recall, last month during our all-member meeting, we did present our overall schedule for Wave 1 and the relative schedules for Waves 2 through 6. We're going to continue to anchor back to this. And as you can see here, this is where we talked about our conversion activities that are in flight. And we've also started to flag where those risks that we talked about, how they affect or what work streams are they applicable to, so that you have that from a reference perspective. So we are tracking that there. As we talked about around converted data test, risk 263, there's a lot of activity that's going on here. The team has been testing everything that they can with the data that's been delivered, and now we are focused on addressing defects. So the team is making good progress here, and we will be within the next 30 days delivering GDS 6, so golden data set number 6. Will be available around March 21st, I think it is, and then it'll take a few days for us to get that loaded into the environment for testing purposes. So in the meantime, we are continuing to work on resolving defects and getting ready for those activities. We're also focused on our mock cutover and working on our overall cutover schedule that we will use for Wave 1. And of course, we'll refine that for future waves. So those activities are in flight. And then of course, we have the imaging exporting. Imaging or the image exports are in flight for the counties within Wave 1. So that's all moving forward as planned. So you can see kind of here's what the next 30 days look like on our overall schedule. If we go to the next slide, we have our system readiness. A number of things are in flight here. Obviously, we have our user acceptance testing planning. UAT is focused on testing the Kalsas system, and they will be doing it with converted data so they can confirm that everything is working. So that activity is in progress. They're currently working through their planning, identifying what they want to test and so forth, identifying what users will be engaged in testing, and figuring out the training aspect of that. We have our imaging testing that's going on. Arnold spoke a minute ago about the enhanced testing from a performance perspective. So that's progressing well. And we will have, and while it's not in the next 30 days, we do have activities related to batch performance. So you have some changes that are going in. However, the main testing of that will be in the May through June, July timeframe. So the team is working forward there. And I'll turn it over to Rachel. I think she's going to talk a little bit about process simulation, county API development.
Thanks, Greg. And I'm going to give just a quick little overview. Next week at OPAC for the Cowling counties, we're going to get into a little bit deeper into the various validation efforts that the counties are going to be participating in or have the option to participate in prior to go live. But in the board meeting last month, or rather the membership meeting, I had mentioned that there's a new effort that we're including, which is an effort referred to as process simulation. And what this does is it gives the counties the opportunity to be able to test with their specific routing rules, their specific configurations, to validate that those workflows and the processes are actually going to work in the way that they envisioned in production. So all of the efforts that the team is doing right now on the process models that we've done with the 2B flows, that's really to go back and make sure that those 2B flows are represented in the way that the system has been configured, and to identify if there's anything that we really need to take a look at and have an opportunity to change that configuration before go live actually happens. So it's a really an early look into that. And then the counties right now are very much involved in making sure that as the systems that they have to prepare that have integration through APIs are being readied. And so the counties right now are involved very in the thick of it, I'll call it, for development to make sure that we're getting those APIs ready for later on this June, when the counties can start to do their testing in the API test environment. So let's move to the next slide and we'll take a look a little bit at the technology readiness. There's a couple of the things that as we look ahead as to where we're headed for technical readiness in the next 30 days. The first is making sure that we get confirmation on the requirements from the technology side. The team is also right now looking at readiness activities specifically around installing the routers and circuits and making sure that those are in place so that as we progress forward, we've got that core infrastructure in place. The team is also working, or not the team, but the counties right now are also working on enabling their extranet. And then relative to kiosks, I am going to update this slide for next month, but the counties right now are going through that analysis to confirm their position on the kiosks and make sure that they understand from a financial perspective what that impact is if the county has opted in to use the kiosks. So that's what we're looking at for the next 30 days relative to technical readiness. If we go to the next slide, I'll give a little bit of overview about training and change and where we are relative to both of those. Where we are right now is the team has started to solicit feedback from the TAC around our instructor-led guides. So that's where the team has been focusing, and they're starting to get that early feedback so we can incorporate that before it gets introduced for the early learning and T4T efforts that are coming up later this summer. The team has also had mentioned that risk 270, that we're working right now on building out those change discussion guides and refining them using that county feedback. And the trigger point for this is making sure that those county or the change discussion guides are ready in time for that early learning and T4T so that the supervisors have it so that they can help to prepare the counties for that change. And then we have a series of readiness surveys that are starting at T-9, which is actually right now, that the team is working on getting out that initial baseline to understand where the counties are relative to their readiness. And then we'll be taking an update on where counties are at T-6 and T-3 as well. If we go on the next slide, I'll talk just really briefly about implementation, a couple of things that are hot and heavy in the implementation area. Our TOS teams have been out with the first wave 1 counties, starting to talk about what the county support needs are relative to implementation. We are working right now on establishing the overall criteria and measures by which we're going to assess readiness. So we've mentioned that there's checklists, but associated with those checklists, we actually have to have what the criteria and the measures are that we're going to use to report on that dashboard that we're going to be publishing at T-6. The work plans I had mentioned have gone out. We're working right now actively on getting the wave 2 work plans so that they can have the wave 2 work plans at T-12. And there's been a request from a lot of the counties for a number of different topics to do a deeper dive. And one of those in particular that has come up is around security education, and specifically around application security and understanding how they map roles and how profiles are understood, because there is a bit of a difference between CalWIN and Kalsas. So there are some education sessions that are going to be coming up here shortly for the counties to attend. In conversion, we're working with the conversion team right now to start to assess for items that do require post-go live county cleanup to get that case ready for running eligibility, what the impacts are going to be to the county and what does that really look like. So the team is working on understanding what those impacts are and working through their data cleansing activities. So there's a lot that's going on in implementation of readiness, a lot around conversion, and some risks that we're looking to monitor as we move forward. And with that, Michael, I am going to turn it back to you.
Great, thank you, Rachel. Any comments, questions from our board members or state partners on this presentation? Any public comment on that presentation? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Rachel. We move on to our next item. I believe that brings us to PMO, Holly Murphy, or did I skip one? Oh, nope, you're right. I did. Kalsas release update. I think that's Lisa Salas coming up. Is that correct?
I think it's Lisa and I actually keep turning on the camera
and Rachel. I want to give you full credit.
I am the understudy for Karen today on the benefits Cal side. So
can't get away.
I can't, not today. Just wanted to give a little bit of an update because I know that there has been a lot of interest and a lot of communication that we have received about some areas of enhancing benefits Cal, and specifically around the release of information. So wanted to give a little bit of an update. We have received approval on the ARPA funding, and that funding right now is available through the current federal fiscal year. And so what has been included in that approval for right now, or not for right now, but what we have planned, is the release of information, which we have heard from our CBO community, the importance of getting this in. What it also includes is additional marketing and communications campaign for benefits Cal. So I had mentioned in that performance, we are expecting a growth factor. So there's an effort around increasing the overall communication and marketing. The third item that's included in the funding is something else that we had heard from our universities about tailoring benefits Cal towards students, because there's certain information that students are, there are student exemptions that are included that we don't have right now in benefits Cal. So that's included in the ARPA funding. And then the last item that's included is a referral code for the community-based organizations. And what this does is actually a referral URL. What this allows the community-based organizations to do is to provide this URL to measure their outreach efforts and the success of those outreach efforts, as well as to be able to quantify what the impact is on the outreach efforts that they have conducted. So these are the 4 areas that we've identified that are included now in September. But in order to accomplish this, there are some items from what is currently planned for release 4.0 in July that would need to be moved to a later release. So I'm going to walk through this. If we could go to the next slide, just give you a little bit of an overview. In release 4, in order to accommodate these changes that I had just mentioned, there are a couple of items. There's 3 in particular. ABOD, which right now there is a state waiver for, and so the plan is to move the ABOD related time clocks view that people could see to next June. We also had included support requests, which are things like people having the ability to request exemptions or extensions for their CalWorks clocks. There were included the ability for people to complete their barrier information for CalWorks 2.0. There was the ability for people to search for jobs related to grow. There was also the ability for individuals to be able to view what their current CalWorks time clock was as well. And so in order to accommodate that timeline that we need to get in for the items that have been prioritized, this functionality would need to move to a later release as well. And we would still keep at this point for July, the 2 items that we've heard that people would like to retain are the 2-way messaging. Right now we have the 1-way messaging between the worker and between the county and the customer. This would enable that messaging to happen back and forth. And then also to include the enhanced chat features. Today, the chat features that we have are supporting if somebody were screening for CalFresh or if they were screening for CalWorks or for Medi-Cal. But what this would include is additional questions that could be included to help facilitate some of the questions that are coming from the customers. So that's what we have right now, what we're looking at relative to ARPA funding and what the impact is on release 4.0. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa to talk about Kalsas updates.
Thank you, Rachel. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. So just going to spend a few minutes talking through the Kalsas releases. We have a quick look back on this slide with our January release that is in production. It had a number of policy items. As you heard from John and Christiana this afternoon, there is a lot of policy in our midst, right in front of us as we work to get those policies implemented before we start the migration waves. So not only did that release go in, we've also been working through a series of priority items. So we have our baseline releases, we have priority releases. You'll see there we continue to do our mass benefit CalFresh updates every month related to bringing the CalFresh households up to the maximum allotment related to pandemic payments. We also issued some benefits there for counties that were impacted by power outages in December. And finally, Kern County is the selected county to participate with CDSS in a safe drinking water pilot. That pilot starts on March 1st. At the end of January, we sent out informing notices to those eligible households. And coming up in a week and a bit here, we will actually be running a process to grant approval to those households and start issuing that monthly benefit. Next slide. So we typically, for Kalsas releases, we have our every other month major release. In February, we also have a CalHears release. And this is true across both source system, Cowling and Kalsas. We have a coordinated release with the CalHears system. There's some key policy items going in this month. In fact, this release is getting deployed this Sunday. So testing is complete. All partners are working on their deployment activities and readiness to start Sunday morning. One of the key items in there is expanding healthcare to all Californians. So granting that full scope Medi-Cal to 50 and older Californians, regardless of immigration status. So we're putting in the changes this month for eligibility, as well as there's some notice changes. There actually will be a batch process in April that we do a runtime run to transition folks from restricted scope to full scope in readiness for the effective date, which I believe is May 1st for this policy. It's also been busy from a priority perspective. Last weekend, we ran the SSA COLA in both source systems. We also ran a batch process for ESAP, as there's a new policy there that's updating the periodic reporting requirements and lifting that SAR-7 reporting requirement. So that ran and results were posted and CIT sent out to the counties. We have another, I think the last week of the month, we have more processes that will run. Medi-Cal, there's a change in eligibility there related to postpartum support from 60 days to 365. We'll run the emergency allotment process again for all 40 counties across the CalFresh population. Plus, as I mentioned, we're issuing the approval notice for Kern County. Plus, we have a lot of correspondence work that we're doing right now. There's a number of work streams in flight around Spanish translations for both state forms and notices of action. So we have about 40 odd forms where we're adding Spanish and working on some notices of action to add Spanish in the March timeframe. Next slide. Never one release in flight at a time. So we are in system test for our March release. We're wrapping up week 3 of testing there. Again, a lot of policy going in. We have the CalWorks time clock changes. This is a much awaited policy, as well as earned income disregard. Applicant earned income disregard is going in. There's a pregnancy special needs change going in as well, from $47 to $100 there in the special need increment. Plus we have GAGR changes going in for our Cowling counties. Again, more policy and priority items. We do have the FPL COLA targeted to start running the night of March 5th. We heard earlier from both Arnold and Rachel around LA County cutover to imaging. We do have a code deployment there to support those cutovers, as well as, again, the emergency allotment process and more translations. Next slide. I'll speed it up a little bit. You get the theme. There are a lot of policy items, a lot of changes, a lot of batch processes. We do try to run those batch processes across the impacted population ahead of the effective dates, which minimizes workload for workers. More batch processes you'll see there in April around some of those changes going in, the EID as well as pregnancy special needs. There is a benefits Cal release going in the 3rd weekend in April. We do have some code changes there. There's a new API around IRT and displaying that to recipients through their portal accounts. That release is in development, and I'll go one more slide. Our May release, we're wrapping up design. We have started development on most items for that release. Again, more policy with some planned priority batch runs as well. And I think that was the last slide for the CalSource releases. Back to you, Michael.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Lisa. Lot of policy updates and things being put in. So this is a very, very busy period for you guys. Any questions or comments from our board members or our state partners on this item?
Michael, just one quick question.
Yes, Gilbert.
Is there any known downtime outside of this weekend for these upcoming releases?
I will have to get back to you on that. If there is downtime, we usually get that out a couple of weeks in advance. We try to minimize the downtime where possible. For example, when we run these batch processes, the system is available. However, there are certain maintenance activities that we do need to do in the system each month, and where we need to take the system offline, we will try to give you advanced notice. Arnold, if you're out there, I don't know if there's any planned maintenance. I'm trying to think off the top of my head for the rest of this month. So I will take that and get back to you as well, Gilbert.
Yeah, I hadn't seen any on the schedule that would hit a Saturday like this one this weekend. This seemed to be a special coordinated one with Cal Hears.
That's right.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments from our board members or state partners? Okay, any public comment on this? Okay, hearing none, then I do believe it's Holly and our PMO update up next. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, Michael. So yeah, page 84. Just a quick update on our
IAPDU for Kalsas. So the team did submit our IAPDU on the 31st of January. That initiated the 30-day state review and approval process. And in support of the state's review, we conducted a walkthrough last week to review the budget changes, answer any initial questions. And then we received comments and questions this week formally that we're currently reviewing and addressing. And then once we address those comments and we get that state approval, we'll move into the 60-day federal review and approval process, which would put us in early May for approval. And we've noted a few examples of the changes on this slide. For example, we've added cost for vendor transition. That's related to the reprocurement of M&O services. And Tom's going to give an update on that next, but we are already planning for that to occur in a future year if needed. So we also included rebaselining of consortium personnel staff loading and costs, as well as routine updates for hardware software. We included a request for some additional benefits Cal M&E hours to assist with addressing the backlog. And this is separate from the ARPA funding that Rachel mentioned earlier. And then we've also added additional hours to support vendor integration as it relates to CalWin implementation support services. This is where there's dependencies in the areas of functional and technical support in key areas of the system, and including environment support for testing of business processes. So those are some of the examples. And once that IAPDU is approved, then updates will be distributed through that county allocation process, and we'll be sharing updates with the county fiscal SMEs as needed. We'll move to our quarterly financial report next. And this slide just gives it's a reminder of how the information is organized, so we can jump to the next slide. And so for today, I'll just update some key highlights about changes that have been made since the last report that we presented in October. We continue to update allocations. We've applied those to our Kalsas category, where we reallocated some funding to address some of the post-go live gaps that were identified for client correspondence, for example. And then for Kalsas, we do still have one premise item that was specific to C4 that's no longer applicable, and that accounts for the majority of those savings in that category. For CalWin, we continue to show our savings for CalHears, which is typical. For C4 and LRS categories, when we last met, we were near final costs, but not quite final. Now we have the final costs, and those are either have just been paid or are about to be paid for the final decommissioning and closeout. Next
so
slide.
Holly,
Yes.
just on that chart, is it just because of the fiscal year splits, or why is there still C4 M&O?
Yeah, C4,
okay.
This is the last state fiscal
Okay.
year for C4 and LRS.
Got it.
And all of those services completed primarily in September, but then there was decommissioning that occurred over the last, over the months following the cutover. And then invoices were still a little bit lagging behind that.
And I noticed that the CalHears interface is over by a pretty high percentage. Is that something that can we anticipate that ahead of time?
That's savings. That's yeah, it's under
okay.
budget.
Yeah, you're right. It's not red. You're right.
Yeah, and that's pretty typical, in particular in our CalWin budget.
Okay.
And Michael, and we're not allowed to use that and reallocate that for any other purposes, like back to general M&O or anything else like that. It has to say specific to that. So if CalHears does not
I had any ideas.
we've taken a run at it. So if CalHears doesn't have as much change, then that just gets underspent. And that's usually what takes place.
Shoot, I thought more resources for our CalWin counties. No, you can't do it. All right.
Nope.
Thank you, guys. Go ahead, Holly.
All right. Next slide, we'll jump into a little bit deeper dive on a couple of areas within our budgets. This one being our consortium personnel. only minor adjustments have been made to the allocations and projections since we last met. We remain on track in this area. The next slide gives the companion details for the FTEs. We do have some resources that either just started or are about to start. We don't currently have any open recruitments, but we are planning for the next recruitment. We do have some additional FTEs and positions coming up that we'll be looking to fill in our implementation and training and some backfill for business analyst positions. Our next page is our maintenance and enhancements, or our change buckets. As previously mentioned, we've got that Cal here savings, along with there's some C4 premise savings in there. And then for Kalsas, you might notice that we increased the M&E allocation through we did a reallocation of some savings that we had identified. And again, that was to address some of those post-go live gaps for client correspondence that I previously mentioned. You can see more details on the next page for the hours. And this is where we track the hours tied to the costs by payment month. That top category for CalWin, we're trending normally for the year. And then we've closed out C4 and LRS. And just as a reminder for the LRS, that was that last month there where we have a credit. That was a reconciliation where we did a shift from M&E to a premise item. And then for Kalsas, we've started to track our hours, and we have hours through December accounted for. And you can see here how our reallocation is translated into those hours for the year. Our normal average per month for the budget is about 15,000 hours, so we've increased that to create additional capacity for those gaps. And then for the next quarterly report, you'll start to see the benefits Cal hours. Our next slide is our contract obligations as incidents occur, and we see incidents that have an impact on the service level agreements. We track those through the clearing process all the way through down to the invoices. So you can see a number noted there that are either completed or still we're tracking through the clearing process. The bottom of the page is our contract credits. We continue to track what we call our modernization hours for CalWin. In particular, those are hours that we use for projects that are on CalWin that are specific to Kalsas. That might be updates in support of conversion, or where we had a recent update for my BCW where we had to update links. And then last but not least, on the last page, this is our change notice tracking details. It's been updated through the January board meeting. And so with that, I'll pause here and hand it back to you, Michael, for questions from the board.
Okay, well, lots of in the black, so that's good. But any other questions or comments from our board members or state partners on this on the budget? Okay, hearing none. Any public comment? Okay, excellent job, Holly. Keeping us in the black. I like that. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the next presentation item.
Thanks, Michael. Let's walk through the procurement update. As you remember, we went out to the vendor community with a number of questions, as well as our requirements and statements of work for both the infrastructure and the M&E components. Here's a numerical summary of what the response was. We got responses from 5 vendors as compared to 6 for the initial RFI. And they all had very illuminating and interesting input that we will selectively incorporate into the RFP. Next slide. Here's just a recap of the 7 not related or questions not related to the statements of work or the requirements. And a number of them are, about the procurement approach, whether there should be 2 or 1 potential contract. And we have incorporated those. We're going to review the details of that with the procurement advisory work group later this month and solidify our strategy for procurement. Next slide. Here, we're just cruising down the road. The vendor responses were analyzed and are being incorporated. To give you an idea, Betty Uzipis, who was very nervous before this, is now a lot more comfortable. So that makes me believe we are moving along. A lot of things are at the 90–95% complete level. Next slide. And our end dates and state reviews and federal reviews are all on target. We are planning a review with our state partners toward the end of March to give them a heads up on how things are organized, how the review is contemplated, and answer any questions they might have. That's it for the procurement update, Michael.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions or comments from our board members or state partners on the procurement update Tom just provided? Okay, I guess more to come as that proceeds forward. Any public comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and keep on pace.
Hey, Michael, this is John. Before I turn it over to June and Wendy for this agenda item, I think maybe just a little bit different than the formality of the conversation and the question, maybe from our board members in particular, this could be a little bit more free flowing of a conversation, because we want to get some input from the January 27th meeting and make this a little bit more of a discussion. And then after that discussion is over, Michael, then we can call for public comment. But I think both June and Wendy are going to pose questions to the board members that were in attendance.
Sounds good. Thank you for the lead in, John. Appreciate that.
Yep. Thanks, John. Thanks, Mike. And I know Wendy's probably out there too. So
I am. Sure I am.
Thank you, Wendy. So we really appreciate the interaction that we can get through these meetings, but we know that they're formal meetings. And sometimes the amount of material and the interaction isn't, just doesn't lend itself to a lot of interaction. So as we look back at our member representative conference that we had in January, we really want to get some feedback from the board members as to how that went. So we have some questions for you, and we appreciate your answers. You can put your feedback in the chat, and if you're not comfortable and you can't think of anything right now, you are welcome to share what you think about feedback and input for the next meeting. You can provide that back to your regional manager. So the first question that we have is, what stood out in your mind from that January 27th member representative conference? Was there something that really stayed with you that was like, gosh, I need to go back and make sure my staff is aware of this, or that was really good information?
I think June's inviting us to to speak freely here. So anybody has any comments, to please share them now. We could also take that afterward as well, but we just wanted to open it up to allow you to share it here.
And we did get some really great feedback from the project steering committee members on Wednesday. And some of you, I also post this to the 20 CWDA meeting yesterday and got some great feedback. So yeah, I'll pause and then we'll move on to number 2 and see if anyone has any feedback there. So number 2 is pretty much, not Goldilocks and the 3 bears, but really Kalsas, the bear, the fox, and the deer. And what was just right, not great, or too much, too little, or what was just the right amount of information. And some of the feedback that we received was that sometimes directors want to know the bottom line. Like, we give a whole lot of detail, but sometimes directors may want to just give me the bottom line, how this impacts my workers, give me the bottom line as to how much this impacts my staff, and things like that. So that's a little bit of the feedback we got in some of our other venues where we were asking these questions.
June, one of the things I might suggest too is that we have meetings every single month and we've been plowing through them, and we have pretty standard decks of a lot of details and a lot of technology or technical updates. Is at maybe the membership representative meetings can be focused much more on the business aspect and business impacts and strategic kind of outlook, and a little bit less on some of the slide drained technical details. That would just be one piece of feedback I would give.
Appreciate that feedback.
What is the objective of the member representative conferences?
Thank you, Marla. Our bylaws say that we have 2 membership meetings each year. And in some of those meetings, we have items that require the membership to vote and to weigh in. We have to have quorum of the 58 counties. So in January, I believe one of those items is the administrative budget. And I see John popped up, so maybe he's gonna help me if I fall short here. But and then in the June meeting, that's where we have the 58 counties and we elect our new board members, we elect our new PSC members. So there is some business that must be done at those 2 meetings. And again, it's in our bylaws that we have 2 per year and the things that happen. And I'll pause there and see if John wants to add anything else.
No, perfect, June. So as we get together all 58 counties and have this meeting, we also think it's a strategic communication opportunity to say what's up and coming. At the June event, we used to have the in-person conference that got tied to that, where we'd spend a day and a half together at a hotel and stuff like that and go through a conference to make sure that the project is strategically aligned with the priorities of the counties and sort of talking through those items. With migration, it's really what is up and coming and where are the counties aligned? What do we already have on our plate? That is very, very full, as you've seen from this meeting and others, to make sure that it's a strategic communication event. So as we gather those 58 counties, that we take that time. With the pandemic, it's been sort of relegated to a 4 to 8 hour Zoom meeting where we have a lot of content, but also there's a lot going on. So we want to make sure that that's in the hands of the counties as we go forward. So, I think we've been doing a good job, but I think we turn on the fire hose a little bit and just sit there and spray you with information for a period of time. And maybe we could be as we start planning for the next meeting, not to steal the last question, but as we prepare for the next meeting, what are some of the things we can look back on and say, good job, I like that. And one of the things that we're saying, you know what, maybe there's some things that you guys can take a run at and tweak a little bit as we start planning for our next meeting. That answer your question, Marla?
Yeah, thank you. I think it is unfortunate we can't meet face-to-face because that face-to-face networking is really an important part of those meetings, I think. From my perspective, sometimes, occasionally I'm an alternative here, but even when I'm not an alternative, to me, Kalsas is so important that I attend all these meetings regardless. I just sit and I listen and I get the information every month. And so when there's these 2 meetings during the year, I don't tend to really hear anything new for myself because I've been coming the whole time anyways, because I want to know, I just want to hear and know. And I'm also, in pretty good touch with my staff that are attending the whole variety of meetings. I think the whole Kalsas project is very well run. I think information is, really well shared. I don't ever feel like I'm in a meeting where I'm surprised by much. Sometimes maybe something comes up, but so I'm just saying that to say, and to responding to your comment about the fire hose, maybe it is too much of a fire hose, but I don't know how many of the other counties that don't sit on the board are attending every month.
Thank you. Thank you, Marla. Any other feedback?
This is Melissa Livingston from Ventura. I would concur with what I heard specifically from Michael, and the fact that I get this information in multiple different forums. So it is somewhat repetitive for me. And it is a large amount of information, and I care less about the technical information, but more about the business impacts and understanding what's working and what's not working well, and what are the impacts to our workers that we need to anticipate, and what are the impacts to the community that we serve that we need to understand to be able to address. So those are the areas I'm most interested in focusing in on.
Thank you, Melissa. That's helpful. Yeah, Becky, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I would add, just to say what is coming is a huge piece of what our staff are looking at, what's coming at them, what the next steps are. And I know that's what directors are looking at. What do they need to be preparing their counties for? And I think that's a huge piece of what we talk about. And then from there, and I know I mentioned in the 20 smalls was an opportunity to maybe do some kind of a breakout room or something. And I know, to talk through what that means, because we're listening, we're connected every single month, and I feel very informed by this group. And I know that you send out our regional supports and connections are key to that. But I think that the directors, when I talk to them, they're like, okay, just tell me what's coming. What's the next thing, and what do we need to know and prepare, and what are you doing to help your staff? What is the consortia suggesting on that? They definitely care about what suggestions you're putting forward and the information. It's just, that next thing versus more of what we did in the past and how we're, getting them up to speed. And I know that you go over a little bit of the overview of this is what we've accomplished in this last year. I think that's important to recognize that, but I think it's a ton of information that day. So if there's another way to kind of share that, I think it would be beneficial for our directors, because, as we all know, we walk into something and it's a whole new language, right? So I think that's part of it as well sometimes. So, but I do appreciate the efforts and the information that is shared in the meetings. So thank you.
Thank you. And we did hear other suggestions for breakout rooms from the PSC members too. So it's a challenge, and we'll definitely take that back to how we can incorporate those types of things.
Yep. Thank you all so much for your feedback. And Rachel, I saw your comment in the chat. So as we look forward to even a longer planned meeting for the June JPA, we're going to take all of this feedback, but if you have additional feedback of, something that you want maybe a deeper dive on in that June meeting, or if you think maybe, a survey might be helpful to send out to say, hey, what are your, top 3 items you want to know more about? And then we can focus on what you all want to hear. And you can always tell us that anytime you want, and share that information with your regional managers, that, hey, this is a topic I'm more interested in. But we really do want to make sure that these meetings, and we know that your time is valuable, and we want to make sure that the meetings provide you with information. And we know all of you are here every month and you hear everything. So yes, we are somewhat catering to those directors that don't come to every single meeting. But we do want to make sure that we're meeting your needs and we're using your time wisely. So we appreciate the feedback. And if there's not any other feedback, we can take what you've told us. We'll be looking forward to hearing anything you want to share with your regional managers or any of the rest of us offline. And we'll be thinking about that June meeting.
I have one other thought. John, maybe when you come to the next CWDA directors meeting, you might ask this question, because that's where you'll get, the full group of people who aren't usually here.
Very good, Marla. I'll make sure that we do that next month at the directors meeting.
Right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, June. Okay, I think that brings us to update on key QA activities.
Thank you, Michael. Just as a reminder, a QA quality assurance team, this is Dan Dean, your project manager. For quality assurance, we are across all work streams on the project, from the portal to Kalsas core to print to M&O. I tried to put together here 4 slides to just give a summary of our current observations and recommendations that should tie to some of the messages that have already been communicated earlier. First slide here is specific to LA Go Live, targeted for March. There's 2 work streams that feed into that, the imaging and portal benefits Cal. On the imaging side, we're currently monitoring the performance testing. For QA, this involves participation in the daily meetings and a review of testing plans and outputs. This includes a review of the environment logs. And as you heard earlier, the results are looking positive in preparation for LA and Cowling cutovers. They've modeled up to 150% of the state of California's caseload, and we expect that when LA goes live, we'll be right around the 65% range. We've also been checking the resolution of the 42,000 documents from the January data restore that could not be found in the search queues. We have learned that the root cause was a maintenance script that was not part of system or independent test, and we worked with Highland and Accenture on a follow-up reconciliation effort, confirming that those totals in the database match with what can be seen through the application. The issue was originally identified as specific to the data restore, so we worked with those teams to expand the reconciliation to the entire application since go live. This ability to search, of course, is relevant for LA, given caseloads to confirm they can search and find documents through the application. In addition to the review of the technology, our team is making office site visits with the imaging team to better understand the county experience and confirm the communication of best practices and issue resolution. In January, we were at about a dozen offices, primarily in the south, with San Bernardino, Riverside, and Kern. And just this month, we're up in the north, Shasta, Tehama, and Sutter. A couple of our observations are that most issues raised have been related to training and the help guides. The counties with stronger training programs had fewer questions and issues. We've made some recommendations to the help guides and supplemental training that have led to some updates to support staff searching and processing images that have been routed to the various queues. When that happens, when it's most likely to occur, and why. Finally, we're monitoring the backlog of enhancement and defect fixes. These will be included in preparations for LA Go Live to confirm the exit criteria. We're going to continue to monitor imaging performance and support and monitor LA's experience after cutover. On the benefits Cal side, we are closely monitoring the policy changes and how they're being communicated to the counties, community-based organizations, and the public. We're continuing to perform independent testing on the high priority items within benefits Cal releases specific to release 3 and 4, as well as on into maintenance and operations. We're also reviewing the training materials for county-based, community-based organizations, and we'll be monitoring for post-go live support. Next slide, please. So our next 2 slides highlight Cowling go live items. The first slide covers the data, the project, and organization readiness. We're tracking and monitoring the defect resolution rates communicated earlier specific to converted data testing, the mitigation efforts that are underway, and progress against plan. There's an additional coordination and timing effort with this item, as once the program logic is updated, the data must be re-extracted into a new golden data set and loaded to the environment to close out. We're monitoring both things, and this item tracks to risk 263. We're highly involved in the conversations and planning around the availability of data, the cleanliness of data, and the planning and preparation for the activities that will use the data. We're also keeping an eye on the 84-hour cutover window, which tracks to risk 258. The conversion team is evaluating the updated case counts. Yep, they've increased during the pandemic, and processing required to transform the data from Cowling to Kalsas. We'll keep you posted on any concerns that might arise over the next few weeks as the conversion team completes its evaluation of the latest golden data set. QA has also raised some risks for project and county readiness, specifically risk 262 for county readiness related to general preparation, materials, and overall guidance. 268 is for overall project and county implementation readiness, and 270 for readiness specific to change discussion guides. Moving from Cowling to Kalsas is a huge change for the counties. We're concerned for the county's experience, the depth of materials, and time to adequately prepare the counties for cutover. We're working closely with the teams and we'll continue monitoring that progress. We're also looking at the county's capacity to participate in all the validation activities that are going to occur. We know there are some lower staffing levels in many counties, and that in conjunction with other external factors could impact some counties' abilities to participate at the desired levels. We're also looking at the post-go live support plans to validate there's the right amount of support on site and from the project so counties can be successful. Thank you. In the area of imaging, there are about a dozen legacy imaging systems that counties are working on tasks now to feed the load to the new system. These include data mapping activities, securing resources from legacy vendors to assist with extract activities, and in some cases, hardware procurement for data load and transfer. Under UAT, QA is leading the Kalsas UAT and coordinating with Accenture, Consortium, and Deloitte to support the integrated UAT, including imaging and benefits Cal, that the Cowling counties will experience from an end-to-end perspective. Some of the items we are watching include the preparation of those UAT scripts and the number of county participants, trying to make sure we have the right balance of participants across both programs and county. Under performance and operations, our QA tech team is reviewing the results of the batch performance testing and the tuning efforts every week to determine if batch processing for the Kalsas counties plus the upcoming waves can remain within the 10-hour window. This item relates to risk 237. Currently, we're tracking plans and results for 6 high-level priorities that could have the largest impact on the window. At the front end of the batch cycle, this is super trigger. In the middle, form generation and file encryption, all the way to the end with report extracts. Additionally, we're reviewing the batch operations plans to confirm that communications and operational reports are ready to support all county operations. Under contingency planning, we are facilitating the overall implementation readiness risk 268. With this umbrella risk, if one of the other risks underneath become an issue, contingency actions might need to be taken, which are being discussed today. We're working with all teams, exploring those options in the event adjustments are needed. Next slide, please. Last but not least, are highlights of QA support for maintenance and upcoming releases. Our QA team continues to support the SCR reviews and independent testing of those high priority items across Kalsas, Benefits Cal, and imaging. This includes regression testing and tracking of automation scripts that grow over time. We execute large independent tests in parallel with our delivery partners and their system test activities for each of the general releases. For priority releases, we also provide observations and over-the-shoulder testing as well. Some of the items we're tracking closely related to M&O include policy updates and enhancements for Kalsas, as well as the rollout of general assistance and general relief targeted for March and May. For Benefits Cal, we're monitoring the language translation testing specific to Release 3 and the independent test of new features such as two-way chat for Release 4. We're tracking security maintenance activities. These are regular processes, somewhat like antivirus updates on your PC, that must be consistently applied to all cloud environments as new threats arise. And related to performance, we're tracking service level agreements and highlighting any potential variance from plans. This includes review of system performance and help desk turnaround times related to ServiceNow tickets. That closes out our update of current highlights. We'll be continuing to monitor across all resources and work streams, reporting back on the highlights and recommendations as we collectively march towards go live in each county. Michael, back to you.
Thanks, Dan. I really appreciate this presentation because I've pressed hard on identifying what QA is doing in your role to try to really help us have a quality product. And I think this actually helps highlight all the different areas that you guys are working in, and we want to continue to highlight those. And you guys are our sounding alarm if we need it, and we need to be making educated decisions based on some of the feedback that you can independently provide to us. So I appreciate you laying this out for the board members so that they can see how QA is involved in just about every aspect of what we're delivering, and I look forward to future updates. So
thanks, Michael.
Any questions? Yes, go ahead, Dan. Okay. Any other comments or questions from our board members or our state partners on this presentation? Okay. Any public comment? Okay, then that takes us to our partnership with the state and the IB&V vendor activities.
Afternoon to all the JPA members and everybody on the call. My name is Kayleen Lyman and I'm with the IB&V team. We just have one slide to go over today. So I'd like to just start at the top. The IB&V team is focusing our efforts on the 6 primary work streams as displayed on the slide. Within each work stream listed are the key activities that our team has determined as being critical to the completion and success of each work stream. The core of IB&V's time and effort is spent on reviewing relevant project documentation, work products, and deliverables, attending key meetings and work sessions, monitoring development status, testing progress, defect resolution, and assessing development and performance against risk mitigation strategies. The first work stream is the imaging stability and performance. You've heard that quite a bit on today's call. The key activities our team is monitoring currently include the project working and resolving the imaging production defects and the ongoing performance testing using the 58 county load. IB&V is looking for quick turnaround on the identified issues and the improved county communications on issues and defect resolutions. Second area that IB&V is looking at is the Los Angeles County cutover, which includes the imaging and benefits Cal move for Los Angeles County. We are currently monitoring the UAT results and preparation activities, including the communications as we move towards that March go live date. The third area is the Cowling converted data testing and the defect resolution. That includes the risk mitigation activities and the resolution of defects as a part of the upcoming golden data sets. The fourth area is batch performance and improvements to scale batch up to the 58 counties and try to work to maintain that 10-hour batch window. The fifth area is the Cowling implementation readiness and how the Cowling counties are preparing to move from the Cowling system onto Kalsas. IB&V is monitoring and reviewing the UAT planning and preparation activities, including county communications, change discussion guides, implementation checklists, and other materials for the Cowling counties. The final area that IB&V continues to monitor is the ongoing development and implementation for Kalsas and benefits Cal functionality and the post-implementation support. Finally, in addition to the above work streams, IB&V does continually monitor the project's risk and issue management process and the project's progress against risk mitigation strategies. So that is the report from IB&V. I would be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any for IB&V.
Thank you, Kayleen. I'd just like to thank you again as well for highlighting for us where you're helping protect the project and make sure that the board's well informed on how ready we are to actually make the next steps, whether it's a release for the next month or it's actually a migration. That we have 2 levels of QA. We have an independent from OSI, and that's your group. And then we also have a QA that's associated with the project. And that was what Dan was speaking about. So I want to open this up also to comments or questions from our board members or our state partners. Okay, hearing none. Any public comment? Okay, thanks both Dan and Kayleen on that detailed update. And I believe that brings us to the end of the meeting. John, is there any parting comments we have for anybody?
Nope.
Other than sticking with us through all this?
That's right. At 20 minutes early on the Friday before holiday weekend.
Yes. We apologize for the scheduling of this one. All right. Well, our next meeting is going to come up on Friday, March 11th at 12:30, and that's going to be right before our migration date. So hopefully we have lots of good news at that point to share with everyone. Without any other party comments, I'm gonna, it's Deborah. Deborah, she wasn't able to make it, right? Deborah wasn't gonna make it. Okay. All right, then. Thank you. Enjoy your long weekends, and please be safe out there, please. All right.
Thank you.
See you next meeting. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.